Welcome to Partnerships for Social and Emotional Learning, a new series of podcasts from the Wallace Foundation. I'm Lucas Held, Director of Communications at Wallace, and I'm delighted to have you join us today. This podcast series features conversations exploring the findings from the first 2 years of an initiative in which 6 communities are exploring whether, and if so how, children can benefit from intentional partnerships between schools and out-of-school time programs to build social and emotional skills, and what it takes to actually do this work. This effort is called Partnerships for Social and Emotional Learning Initiative, or what we have affectionately come to call PSELI. The 6 communities in the initiative are Boston, Dallas, Denver, Palm Beach County, Florida, Tacoma, Washington, and Tulsa, Oklahoma. I want to thank our research partners at the RAND Corporation, whose findings and early lessons we'll explore in depth over this series. The first report, Early Lessons from Schools and Out-of-School Time Programs Implementing Social and Emotional Learning, is available without charge on the Wallace and RAND websites. We hope its findings will be useful whether you're a district, an out-of-school time provider, or a group of both collaborating, as well as to policymakers. Today's episode will focus on why developing the social and emotional skills of adults is important. In his first public report on the PSELI initiative, Rand found something that might be just a little counterintuitive, that to help young people develop social and emotional skills, we might actually need to focus on the adults first. So to help shed some light on why this perhaps puzzling finding might be the case, and also how this was carried out in one community, that's Palm Beach County, I'm delighted to welcome our 3 guests, all of whom are from Palm Beach County. We have with us Kristen Rulison, who is SEL manager for the Palm Beach County School District. We have Knellee Bisram, who is SEL specialist at Prime Time Palm Beach County. That's an intermediary organization that provides supports for high-quality program toward positive youth development in out-of-school time programs. And we also have Charlie Peterman, who is cafeteria manager at the Crosspointe Elementary School. So thank you all each so much for joining us today. Let's kick it off with Kristen. So Kristen, from the school district's perspective, when thinking about building SEL skills in students, why should one start with the adults? And I'll just mention that in its first evaluation report, RAND found that 4 professional development topics were particularly common across the 6 cities. One was defining and giving an overview of SEL. The second was activities to help students build social and emotional skills, that is, activities to help adults help students. Third, helping teachers build their own skills. And fourth, ways to actually integrate SEL into instruction and other activities. So tell us a bit about what kind of skills that Palm Beach County was trying to build and why.
So something that, we believed in that was really important is that SEL skills benefit everyone, not just kids and youth. In fact, when we were coming up with our own definition of SEL as a community, we were very intentional to include adults in our definition. And that's because if we're going to ask kids and youth to practice these SEL skills, then as adults, we need to model this. That phrase, action speaks louder than words. If I'm going to say that, we need to get along, but a colleague of mine walks in and I start yelling at her in front of the class, they're going to see my actions versus what I'm teaching, right? So also, in addition to the modeling of the SEL, teaching can be very stressful at times. And we know that stress affects our health and well-being. So we wanted to make sure that we were also spending time to really promote adult self-care practices and help educators be able to get those strategies to cope with stress and manage their own emotions. And our goal was to create this space in the work environment where adults can cultivate, practice, and reflect on their own SEL skills while feeling supported, valued, and empowered.
Really interesting. So, Knellee, let's go over to you. Does that sound familiar? Did you take a similar strategy with the out-of-school time providers that you work with from the intermediary?
Yes, definitely. We've had a really heavy focus on building the adult intrapersonal and interpersonal skills. So in the out-of-school time space, I would say, so we offered an SEL Academy where like 60%, about 2/3 of the emphasis was on really having an experiential and an inquiry-based approach to cultivating those skills from the inside out. So this idea of embodied presence and embodied social emotional intelligence was at the core of, the self-care of the adult, the ability to internalize, model. And then really what that did was made it a lot easier for the other learning that was happening around delivering explicit instruction or how to integrate SEL all of the time. It made it much easier and gave them more confidence because they were able to relate on a personal level to what SEL meant to them.
What you're reminding me is that in psychoanalytic training, all psychoanalysts actually have to go through their own analysis. So they experience what it's like. So it sounds like there's something similar in that kind of building a foundation. I mean, the phrase you used, Knellee, was embodied presence. And Kristen, you talked about action speaking louder than words. This, though, is a little bit different, I think, than equipping teachers to teach math or history. Was this a difficult idea to introduce?
For us, it wasn't difficult because we understand the nature of social and emotional learning. And I think maybe on the front end, it was about having the patience to give them the experiences so that they could understand for themselves why that approach is important. So, and I would also say that it wasn't an either or proposition. It was a both and. So it's building that foundation of embodied understanding and practice using a trauma-informed approach, a whole person approach, where the adults themselves begin to feel included and understand how belonging and equity even can arise from that. And then with that understanding, scaffolding on top of that, the skills necessary to teach young people how to develop those skills themselves, but from an adult who are themselves at least attempting with some degree of vulnerability, I should mention as well, right? Because we're not perfect, to embody these skills so that it becomes real, there's a lot more integrity of purpose and it's much more sustainable as well.
Kristen, does that resonate?
Absolutely. SEL it's a journey. It's not something that you master at once. And we really just want to create this environment where everyone really understands the importance of reflection. It's not about being perfect or being, a perfectionist at something and getting it right every time. But when things don't go right, do you take time to stop and reflect on, okay, what could I do better next time?
Great. Well, let me jump ahead to Charlie. So Charlie, you're cafeteria manager at Crosspointe Elementary. You've been there for 9 years, undoubtedly seeing many students, and you requested SEL training for your cafeteria staff. So why was that? What did you hope they would learn?
Well, our school is really very active in trying to make the whole school a community. And unfortunately, the cafeteria and other departments are not available to go to the many workshops because of the time management. So I really felt for my staff, we needed team building. And I love the concept of the SEL learning. I wanted them to have more empathy toward each other because they are big role models. The children come through. We have, on a normal basis, we have over 600 children that come through, and they see what we're doing and how we're reacting to each other. And I felt that it was really important for my staff to, one, feel part of the community of the school so that we all had the same vision. We're all on basically speaking the same language throughout the day. So the kids see it no matter where they go. Also, I wanted them to really learn how to communicate better with each other and have more empathy towards the adults. They show a lot of empathy for the children, but we've got to show it to each other as well.
That gets back to what Kristen was saying about actions speaking louder than words and that kind of modeling. How long was the workshop or series of workshops, and what kind of impact did it make?
I will be honest, we had 4 workshops. They were an hour long. And at first, they were a little resistant because I think Knellee said, if you don't really understand the process, you're really not sure what you're getting into. They did a lot of team building. One of my favorites, because I have a very diverse group of employees, it was the where everyone looked at each other. They had a partner and they had to look at each other for a minute and just realize that it doesn't matter that we're all different looking. We all feel the same.
So there is power in silence. Well, Kristen, I mean, oftentimes cafeteria might be kind of overlooked in a district's SEL effort. So from your perspective, why is this, and why is it so important that these sort of non-classroom spaces are considered part of the community?
Every adult on campus has a very important role in a child's life, and they might not even realize it. In fact, as Charlie was talking, one of the first adults that my own daughter sees every day when she goes to school is the cafeteria manager. And I kid you not, but she calls Miss Karen her best friend because Miss Karen is the one that greets her every morning when she goes to get breakfast. And, school should become this family, and it's your home away from home, right? We want all the kids and even staff to feel safe and feel like that this is their family and that they have this sense of belonging. So I think it is really important that every adult, you don't know who's going to be the first adult to greet a child that day. It could be the attendance clerk in the front office. It could be the bus driver. And not only that, so often we work within our grade levels as teachers. What has been really nice about this approach that we've tried with SEL and trying when we can bring everyone together, you really get to know the people that you work with and you see every day. And you get to form those deeper relationships, and it makes the workplace, a happier place to be. And when people are happy, they perform better in their jobs. And it also helps with employee retention. And
Knellee, does this idea of sort of the community also apply in the OST realm?
Absolutely. I mean, so I was actually involved in the in the 4 sessions that Charlie's talking about, and I remember facilitating that activity, and there were tears, right? And I remember thinking after that experience how important it is to build an ecosystem. And the ecosystem expands beyond school day. It expands into OSD, which is like the whole premise for this project. And in Palm Beach County, it even expands to the larger community of providers that are serving youth in some capacity. So much of what we're talking about, we have expanded into the community especially in the area of adult SEL, as a means to really embodying and I guess shifting the culture of or just our way of being, and hoping that over time that begins to, some of what Kristen was mentioning, that begins to really strengthen relationships, which is really the foundation for everything, right?
And you use the word ecosystem. So I think one of the questions this raises is how these ways of modeling behavior can be reinforced and sustained. Obviously, staff changes, new folks come in, come out, retirements. How have each of you thought about the question of sustainment? And maybe start with you, Kristen, and then Charlie and Knellee.
Yeah, so that's something that we've been working on with Primetime and really talking and thinking about how do we keep up with new employees as they start, and how can we embed social emotional learning into part of their onboarding program. So we've been looking at that. And then again, even if you aren't a new employee, this concept of it's not a one and done experience, right? We're always reflecting, we're always growing. So how do we keep that going? And we've, there's so much with SEL to do and focus on. It's almost like an onion. You can keep peeling layers back and go deeper and deeper. And so we've been incorporating, there's different practices now that we have as part of our culture, where, we've started SEL signature practices such as a welcoming ritual, and engaging practices and ending meetings with an optimistic closure, and embedding these practices into our everyday life, not just for adults, but also for students.
So it's really the kind of ritualization that you're relying on in part to sustain these things, kind of weaving it into the fabric. How about you, Knellee?
Something that was really simple, a sort of simple mantra that we tried to invoke in the OSD space, and I believe this is also happening in the school day space, is that what really shifts behavior is daily practice. So it could be something small, but it has to be intentional, meaningful, and explicit. And it has to be something that where there's a common understanding and language around. So whether it's signature practices, I'm also a mindfulness trainer, so I'm a huge advocate for sort of the inside out approach to SEL, which is this idea of embodying presence. So, and we can do that anywhere with our breath. So one practice that we use is called a power pause, and that has really been transformative because it's literally coming into the present moment wherever we are, whenever we are. So if nothing else, this idea that we are in control of how we practice SEL at any moment really also allows us to have some agency around we don't need to attend a lengthy training, or if we don't have time to participate in coaching, if we could hold on to one practice that really can carry us, then it really starts to shift the culture, not just in the immediate school community, but in the broader community.
Which then implies as giving people a practice they can hold on to and use implies then that you've invested in building a kind of common understanding of what those practices are, what the tools are. I know that's something that also emerged in the RAND study. So, Charlie, how are you thinking of keeping this going?
Actually, it was such a success. My employees actually said it helped them in their home life also.
Wow.
So we have kind of, they actually requested when we can to have more training, which I was really pleased about. And one of the things that we do in the morning, I have a 5-minute meeting, and I ask everybody to give me their word for that morning, that day. That way, if we know if somebody's not having such a great day, we can extend a little bit more empathy towards them. And we know how everybody's feeling, and we try to just lift the ones up that are not having a great day.
Thanks. That's helpful. Let me ask Kristen, of course, we've since March been swept up in the impact of COVID-19. How has this affected the district's work in SEL?
It actually, I think, has helped kind of put a spotlight on SEL and the importance of SEL, believe it or not. I think everyone was really concerned about everyone's well-being and mental health during this time, that we actually had a lot of adults reaching out and asking for help. And the schools that already had some of these systems and rituals and practices in place, it was really neat to see that they were able to then transfer this into a virtual setting. And we saw that even though, in the spring, we weren't all able to be together in the same room and we were meeting through Google Meet, we still had those relationships. We still knew a lot about each other, so we could call in, check in on each other, check in on their families, and really not just practice our own self-care, but help and make sure that everyone else's well-being and everybody else was doing good at that time. I think too, for principals, the principals that have really been leading with that SEL lens, I think it really helped them know how to start with their staff's well-being first and making sure that they were all okay, and really being able to continue to build on those relationships.
Sounds like the process of building these skills, in effect, built some social capital between the adults. I'm seeing some head nodding from Knellee and Charlie. Anything you guys would want to add on that COVID question?
That was beautifully said, and we experienced the same thing in OSD. I mean, I think the words I would use are prosilience and resilience. I think we invested in prosilience. And prosilience is kind of like storing up, right, for when the storm comes. And when COVID happened, we heard everywhere practitioners and directors in the out of school time space saying, we're so glad we learned these skills because we are really using them right now. If we weren't serious about them before, we're really using them now. In the out of school time space, because there was an in-person school for a very long time, towards the end of the semester and then even over the summer, we had to pivot and adapt a lot to support not just socially and emotionally, but also financially, helping by offering stipends to practitioners to stay engaged in professional learning, which really worked well. And so that was sort of an indirect way to keep them in the fold in a way where they were continually having their self-care needs met. We use, as I mentioned, a trauma-informed kind of mind-body approach, which they really appreciated. We came out with a self-care challenge that was made available. It's an on-demand video series that was made available and was highly utilized. And the other thing that we learned is that we have to offer some variety in our professional learning because the world is online. And so we pivoted to virtual, in-person, live, but also created some self-paced options because in the out-of-school time space, there are challenges with scheduling, there's high turnover. And so that allowed us to be more inclusive of those who were missing out on professional learning before to really be able to benefit.
So different entry points. Charlie, do you want to add anything?
I think if we try to find something good that has come out of the pandemic is, I think with the social emotional learning, those of us that had a base and those are learning, I think we have learned how to communicate with each other and also really listen to what the other person is saying, because we don't have the hands-on and we all have a mask on, so it's hard to read facial expressions. So I really feel like we're all learning to use our words more effectively.
Well, speaking of using words effectively, we want to just give each of you a quick chance to offer any advice to counterparts across the country who are thinking about intensifying their SEL work. So let's start with Knellee, then go to Charlie and Kristen. What bit of advice would you give a colleague having been through this intense multi-year PSELI initiative?
So there are three things that come to mind. One, we talked about, we can't teach what we don't practice. Inside-out approach to SEL is what works. Secondly, patience, especially if you're going to do 7-to-7 approach, because we need time to build relationships, and that's foundational. So it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And then thirdly, close to my heart, design with equity in mind on the front end, so that the expression of SEL is more organic, more diverse, and it promotes, while we're building the SEL skills, we're also promoting justice and inclusion.
Great, thanks. Let's go to Charlie. What advice for a colleague, cafeteria manager?
My biggest advice is that they should look into SEL and bring it to their team in the cafeteria, and they will definitely see a difference. I find that if you live more mindfully, you are aware of other people and your own self-awareness of your actions. So I would highly suggest at every opportunity that I really believe that all cafeteria managers should bring this to their team.
Thanks. And let's go to Kristen.
So start and continue with the adult. And remember that even after you lay that foundation with the adults around SEL, it's ongoing. And to continue ways to embed that so it becomes part of your everyday practice, as well as I would say, think about SEL as a 4-year project of getting started. And you almost need to go slow. It could be a little overwhelming at first where you're like, oh my goodness, there's so much to do. So really think about what are our goals for the next 4 years and come up with like a 4-year, multi-year plan so that you take on different aspects across those 4 years. And that way you can go deep and you're not trying to do everything at once. And that really then involves more time for self-reflection and practice, which is key to this work.
Well, terrific advice from our expert panel who have indeed experienced this from the inside out, and we very much appreciate their wisdom. Thank you.